Okay, today joining us on the live line is a young man, Andrew Demeter, whose name you will be hearing. He is worth remembering because this bright man is a 16-year-old sophomore at Notre Dame Cathedral Latin. He recently won the nationwide C-SPAN Student Can competition. There were over 2,300 submitted documentaries, and Andrew Demeter, our own Andrew Demeter right here of Lake County, is the C-SPAN winner. Andrew, welcome to the live line this morning.
Thanks for having me on, Ellen. It's a true pleasure.
Well, let's talk. There's so much that we want to get to because you didn't hear the intros. We've been talking about you all morning. I've said you're as nice as you are smart. But let's talk about the smartness here. You know, you're a sophomore. You're attending Notre Dame Cathedral Latin. You know, and all of a sudden you hear about this contest and what most important issues Congress should consider in the year 2014. What struck you when you first heard this? Like, I can do this, or what subject you're going to hit? What ran through your mind?
Well, I've been doing political commentary online for quite a while now, but specifically when I heard of that contest, the first couple things that I was contemplating were the topics of drones and the NDAA, which I can tell you about if you're interested, but I eventually decided against those topics because in the process of contacting some people to interview for this documentary, they were pretty much not really open to discussing those issues, and rightfully so because they're very controversial. So I figured GMOs, that was the topic of my video, and I figured that was a bit better of a choice because it affects everyone. It transcends everything. Everybody needs food. So in essence, that's why I chose GMOs in context of that contest's question.
But GMO, that stands for?
Genetically modified organism.
So your topic was We the People, genetically modified, and you started to look through that. So how did you start researching this?
Well, like I said, I've been doing this for a while now, so I had already prior knowledge of GMOs, genetically modified organisms, and I really just figured that it's this really silent epidemic almost plaguing the United States of America. In other countries, over 60 other countries, they ban these genetically modified organisms. And before I continue, though, I think it's important to define what this is for people who don't know, because many don't.
Next question, what is it?
Right. A GMO, a genetically modified organism, is essentially food made in a laboratory. An example of this would be something called the fish tomato that actually never hit the market, but essentially the fish tomato was created to make it resistant to cold so it could grow in cold climates like here in northeastern Ohio. But anyways, Ellen, the fish tomato was created by taking a gene, a piece of information from a winter flounder that lives in very cold temperatures, taking that gene that regulates its body temperature and then injecting that kind of into the tomato, so therefore modifying its genetic structure and, again, making it resistant to cold temperatures. So the main argument for those proposing GMOs or GM foods is that they can increase crop yields and therefore provide more food for humanity as a whole.
Yeah, but when you're talking about a GMO, genetically, altered food, like corn is
right.
Genetically altered. I didn't know this until I'm reading this. I'm thinking, I'm eating corn, which I love. It's genetically altered. Here's a question to jump to. So if we're eating this food, and most people in America aren't even aware of it, but yet you'll hear mothers and fathers saying, we have more allergies, we have cancer. Do you think it's related to what we're eating?
I most definitely think it's related to what we're eating. We can see GMOs were first introduced in the 1980s, and since then, a myriad of allergies, diseases, disorders, etc. have been on the rise. So correlation with the implementation or integration of GMOs into our culture may not necessarily imply causation, but it still is a definite possibility. And during the documentary, I interviewed a doctor among many others, like farmers and biologists, and while everybody's kind of has their own stance on the issue and has their own side to the argument, I definitely think there is room to make that claim.
So, you have that. Are you stunned by the number of people, such politicians, that are making rules and regulations? Are you stunned by their lack of either concern or knowledge about GMOs?
Yeah, most politicians and most people involved in this argument are simply incompetent. I attempted to interview not only politicians, but also other people like a local grocer and also a local doctor. And while they had initially agreed to do interviews and said they were very interested, and they even said they were very knowledgeable, and in some cases they had personal discussions with family friends, and they were incredibly intelligent and knowledgeable on the issue, they then later said, after speaking to their higher-ups and pretty much being not allowed to discuss this issue on camera at the expense of their job, then they ended up canceling. So these people who are knowledgeable about this stuff aren't even allowed to be talking about it. So that's a very scary part. And even on a national level, some regulators in Washington, one of the main things that turned me on to GMOs was the fact that there's this revolving door between corporations and the government itself. Michael Taylor's a great example of this. He was previously the vice president for public policy at Monsanto, and then now he's the current food safety czar at the FDA. So the people the very people who are supposed to be regulating these foods and concluding that they're safe for public consumption are the very ones that stand to gain by passing them for the market. So it's absolutely ludicrous to me.
It's monetary, because they're also contributing to these campaigns to keep people in office. But imagine a 16-year-old, a little genius, is starting to talk about GMOs, and nobody wants to talk with him. Imagine if you're a corporate trying to make some decisions, what's going on. You called it the depth of a rabbit hole. You must find, after doing this research, and the research must have taken you hundreds of hours, you walk away, I bet you're not only smart about GMOs, but I bet you're smart about how government works.
Yeah, while the contest, or the documentary rather, was specifically about GMOs, I really learned more about the corporate interests of America and the fact that people are willing to keep their mouths shut as opposed to voicing their opinions on these issues that are very important to not only our country, but people in general. As
you're speaking, Andrew, if you could see the heads in this, as you're talking, we're shaking our heads no. As you're talking what you just said about people ignoring the facts, our heads are saying yes. You're hit upon a topic that every parent and every individual should really be looking for food now that's GMO-free. I mean, that's just, it's better for your bodies, correct?
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean that, but ideally, I mean, there's no really scientific or conclusive evidence because, again, all this revolving door of corporate interest, there's really no conclusive evidence to prove anything because the tests are done with incompetence. But I think it is interesting that instead of having, because all these corporations, let's say, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say 90% of all food in grocery stores, depending where you shop, is genetically modified. But the awesome part of free enterprise and the free market here is that instead of having to rely on these big-name mega-corporations, these multinational corporations, many food companies are coming out now and advertising that they have non-GMO or organic products. And that's really where the hope is, because to turn the tides of these mega-corporations is going to be a lot more difficult than starting at a local level, and that's really the power of the free market. Okay, so here we have first of all, I think they ought to reduce the age to run for Congress so Andrew can run. I think you'd be a real asset. Now, let's move on. April 25th is going to be Andrew Demeter Day for C-SPAN. This video will be on C-SPAN repeatedly on April 25th. But if people want to go online to see it today, can they see it, Andrew? Yes, you can go to youtube.com/teentake, TEENTAKE, or you can go to andrewdemeter.com. Demeter is DEMETER. I've watched it several times. It is really worthwhile watching. Andrew, April 25th should be Andrew Demeter Day, and I think Sister Jacqueline should just be so proud of you for what you have brought forth, not only for the Notre Dame Cathedral Latin community, but for what you have done to make people aware of what we put on our plate may not be what we think, that fresh corn grown in the field. So you want to go give your YouTube site again, because it also has other things that you have done. Yeah, it's youtube.com/teentake, TEENTAKE. So from this, Andrew, do you think as you move forward that you'll continue to start investigating more and more about the food processing? Most definitely, but not only the food processing, also just this ignorance that the country really has. I mean, knowledge is power, and these powers that be really don't want an informed consumer. So I've definitely covered in the past a slew of other issues, but I'll definitely be interested to delve even deeper into this conspiracy of sorts of genetically modified foods, and I'll really keep the door open and see where that path takes me.
Well, I think people should know Andrew Demeter, Demeter. Please go online and watch this video. It is so educational, but easy to watch, easy to understand. Andrew, your hundreds of hours of research have really centered on something that I think you've hit a core, because you said something. People don't want to talk to you, and there's a reason for that, because you're right. Andrew Demeter is right. We thank you so much this morning for joining us on the live line. Please continue your work. I'd like to have you back on to tell us what you're doing, and I think you're a hero, Andrew. I truly mean it. I think you're a hero for what you're doing.
Well, thanks for having me on, Ellen. I really appreciate it.
You're to be admired. That's Andrew Demeter. Go back, look at his YouTube. And he's very serious about this subject, but his YouTubes are really funny. Some of them are truly, truly funny. So there's nobody better than this Notre Dame Cathedral Latin sophomore. He's 16 years old. Doesn't drive a car yet. He only has a temporary because of his age. But he can take on Monsanto. Don't you love it, Mr. Gutierrez?
You know I do.
I love it. Andrew Demeter's a hero.
You know I love it. Absolutely.